Buster Douglas was a 42-1 underdog when he fought Mike Tyson. Evander Holyfield was a 25-1 underdog when he fought Mike Tyson in '96. Oliver McCall was a huge underdog. I can't remember the exact odds, but he was a huge underdog when he fought Lewis the first time. Hasim Rahman was a huge underdog when he fought Lewis the first time. Leon Spinks was a huge underdog when he fought Muhammad Ali. His brother Michael Spinks was a huge underdog when he fought Larry Holmes the first time. And in all those instances, the huge underdog, the guy who wasn't supposed to win at all, the guy who wasn't really given a prayer in most cases, actually won the fight. And they not only won the fight, but they managed to beat an all-time great in the process. And an all-time great who, in some cases, was in his prime, and in other cases, was maybe not in his prime, but was still an extremely formidable world-class fighter. Hence the odds. I say all that to say this. Joseph Parker is a 6-1 underdog against Anthony Joshua. And those are pretty long odds, but not that long historically. And Anthony Joshua, rightly or wrongly, is not yet held in as high regard as the all-time greats that I just mentioned. He's not held in as high regard as a Lennox Lewis or Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson or even Larry Holmes. So for him to lose to a 6-1 underdog, the possibility of that happening shouldn't be so far-fetched when you look at the history of heavyweight boxing, because it is replete with upsets, monumental upsets involving some of the greatest heavyweights of all time losing fights. Another example, in Muhammad Ali beat Sonny Liston. Ali was a huge underdog in that fight. I think he was something like 8-1. So an even bigger underdog than Joseph Parker is. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, you boxing historians, but I think Ali was something like 8-1 underdog against Liston. So when you consider the fact that all those things happened and all these great fighters lost in fights they were not supposed to lose when they were still very formidable world-class fighters, people shouldn't see it as ridiculous to entertain the possibility that Joseph Parker might beat Anthony Joshua. And at the same time, people should also not see it as ridiculous, and very few people do, to be fair. But people shouldn't see it as far-fetched that Luis Ortiz could beat Deontay Wilder. In terms of betting odds, I believe Luis Ortiz is a 2-1 underdog against Deontay Wilder. So he's not a massive underdog by any stretch of the imagination, relatively speaking. So we have to entertain the possibility that both of the favorites in those fights could actually lose. And then we'd be left in a very surreal scenario where we'd have Joseph Parker and Luis Ortiz potentially squaring off for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Can you imagine that? Joshua and Wilder both losing. And then we're getting Parker against Ortiz. Crazy, right? You have to imagine there are rematch clauses in place, though. Particularly for, well, I think for both fights. There's immediate rematch clauses in place for Joshua if he loses to Parker, and also for Wilder if he loses to Ortiz. So I guess in that sense, it'll be improbable, but you never know. History and life can be strange. Who says that the loser would necessarily take a rematch? Who says that they wouldn't take a rematch and lose again? Life is strange. So even though the betting odds and reality doesn't really favor this particular timeline that I'm entertaining here, it is a possibility, and it's a possibility that's not that far-fetched. Joseph Parker versus Luis Ortiz for the Undisputed Heavyweight title. Who would you pick in that fight, incidentally? Just something to think about and ponder. Just for the record, I'm picking Joshua and Wilder to prevail in both those fights. So I'm not saying that this unexpected timeline is going to unfold. I'm just saying it's not beyond the realms of possibility at all. Because neither Joshua nor Wilder are currently held in as high regard as Ali, as Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, etc. And those guys lost to far bigger underdogs than Luis Ortiz or Joseph Parker. So yeah, let that be said. Anyway, it's happening. I'm out.